We are still here, and as you can see, we moved on to another set, the dynamism that is Daybreak. And like I told you at the tail end of that interview, is that as you've seen, my guest is from Africa Stream, and he'll tell us what it's all about, because we want to talk about then how we can use social media to change some of the stories that we've had. Eric Gavala, how are you doing, sir?
Very well.
Karibu sana.
Thank you for having me.
What do you do for Africa Stream?
Well, I'm operations manager at African Stream. We started just 6 months ago. It's been a fantastic ride.
Right.
We can't wait to see where else we'll be going. But in a nutshell, African Stream is a pan-African, anti-imperialist, African-centered media organization, based on all major social media platforms. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We have very impressive growth on TikTok at the moment. Currently, we are at about 105,000 followers. Generally, across all the board, we have about 10 million views.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it's doing well. Our content is diverse. We have content from, the Pope visiting the DRC the other day, to the Great Ethiopian Run, which has helped to bring together people, the tensions that were there, to the positive stories, like the 4 elderly people in the Niger Delta that took Shell to The Hague because of oil spillage in the Niger Delta and actually won. So such inspirational stories. So it's not all doom and gloom in Africa, as what the Western media or what sometimes traditional media tries to portray. The African story is looking up. We have very, very diverse content just to inspire, educate, entertain the masses.
Yeah. And so when you talk about again the African story, like we've seen, as we were talking there, tax, corruption is something that has been there in most of the African stories, most African countries. And now that, we are using social media as a tool to change this African narrative, how does one position themselves? How is that being done online? What are the spaces that is happening online?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. We've seen a couple of companies come up where they do some sort of crowdfunding. And it's not crowdfunding in terms of cash, but crowdfunding in terms of footage or stories. So now everyone has a smartphone, or most of the people in Africa now do. Because of the internet penetration, 60% of Africans own a smartphone. And the median age in Africa is the youngest across the world. We have a median age of just 19 years compared to 30 years elsewhere in places like Asia. So we have a vibrant, population, and many people, many young people take to themselves to post content on these platforms that could flag up, corruption issues. So that is one way that people can basically stand up for themselves and not wait for institutions, for institutional level to come up like, the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission. But as a person, as an individual, what can you do? You're somewhere, you're seeking a service. You've seen that there's some corruption deals happening. You have the power in your hand.
You can talk about it.
Exactly. For a while now, the power dynamic has been on corporate institutions or government-owned institutions in terms of media, who is telling the story. But now that power dynamic is shifting. We are now seeing Africans who have smartphones, going online and telling their story. There's a sister in Uganda the other day I saw telling an incredible story through sarcasm. Just putting up their phone, they have internet, and cracking the whip.
Just like what Njugush does sometimes.
Exactly. And we are not just focused on Africa. We have people also, outside of Africa who are very interested in African content. For example, the things we've been hearing about Black Lives Matter. We like to think of it as, for Black lives to matter, African lives have to matter first. Why? Because Africa is not respected outside. There are other countries like China, like India, which have people, across the world, and if their citizens get into problems, they are not treated as Africans or as blacks, because African countries as individuals and as the continent are not being respected. So which is why now African Stream is coming up in telling the African story in a unique way, because there's a big gap in the market whereby we've had organization tell the African story in a colonial way, you know, in a neo-colonial way even, where, you know, in the West, it seems like, you know, Africans are still living in trees. We are still living in caves.
I mean, this is 21st century. You meet somebody from Europe and they ask you, do you live in trees? Do you see lions? Do you see giraffes? Like, it's like we're in the open.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the common, it's an unfortunate story. Like our CEO one time just posted a photo from here in Nairobi. Just a usual photo of Nairobi traffic. And someone in the States, a Jamaican citizen, was like, you know, wow, I didn't know that Nairobi looks like this. I thought there'd be donkey carts.
See?
You know, and this is, you know, someone who is of African descent, yes, Jamaican, but, you know, roots traced to Africa. So, you see, there's that demand for information about Africa, because the misinformation that has been happening is just so obtuse.
Right.
And I could say we have to now put the record straight, right, and tell the African story from an African's perspective.
Yes, talking about the African story, there's the African story and then there's African history. Some schools are now even, I don't know about in the CBC, but I guess, I mean, we've been taught, but I think it's changing. Some schools are actually making it important that people learn African history. One of the artists I like, now that you mentioned Jamaica, one of the artists I like is Chronix, and in one of his songs he says, there is a teacher, and just to quote him, a white teacher teaching African history. I wonder who taught him. Yeah, taught him the story. I mean, yeah, I mean, you can learn about African history and teach it, but you get what I'm saying.
I get you.
Like, it's not being told by Africans. So where can we get some of this information? Like, what are some of the individuals and organizations that are telling positive African stories?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, when you go online, the other day I was online and I saw somebody turn around a story about Rwanda and give a perspective, and if I wasn't like, I was like, this looks like an agenda. Like the things they were saying, I can't even repeat, of Kagame and of Rwanda. So what are some of the places we can go to get these positive, rich African stories?
Well, there's been an explosion, right, of content creators, you know, that are based here in Africa and that are actually African,
okay,
who are doing these, you know, positive stories about the continent. So at personal level, definitely we have vloggers, as they are called.
Right.
You know, we have this amazing gentleman called Tayo Aina, who travels across Africa showing people the other side that the media doesn't show you. You know, like the sand dunes in Namibia.
Right.
You'd be so shocked that they're so amazing. You'd think that you're in Dubai.
Right.
So instead of catching a flight to go to the Middle East,
go to Namibia.
Why not go to Namibia?
Right.
Help pay Namibian tax, help create employment in Namibia. So at personal level, we have vloggers. At institutional level is where, you know, the gap has sorely been lacking.
Right.
And which is why African Stream is stepping in. Mm-hmm. We have, like I said before, you know, diverse content. You know, one of the things that, you know, according to the example you've just mentioned, the story has been that Africa is only good for its raw materials, right? That anything that is beneath the surface, the gold, the diamonds, name it, that's what Africa is good for. But, you know, we did a story recently which shows that basically, you know, African intellect, people, the people above the ground, we have this phenomenon called contract cheating.
Right.
You know,
contract cheating,
where, you know, universities or students in the West use Kenyans,
yes,
you know, to basically do their dissertations and their papers.
Right.
We had one you know, account where someone did an undergraduate, a master's, and a PhD. So these are African minds which are very good doing all of this work. However, when it comes to the global scale of things, we are only valued at our raw materials. So we've seen a proliferation of countries standing up and saying, you know, if you have to deal with us in that manner, then you have to put up plants here in Africa. You saw the other day Nigeria and Tesla.
All right,
you know,
yes.
with the lithium story, saying if you have to get the lithium, come here. Pay Nigerian tax, employ Nigerian people, so that the Nigerian economy... Exactly. Same story happened in Zimbabwe. Said no to exportation of lithium. You've seen last year, Ghana, the president said that we are not exporting any more chocolate to Switzerland. And Switzerland are the biggest, you know, one of the biggest exporters of chocolate. It's a $5 billion a year industry. But Ghana, despite being the biggest producers, the farmers at the bottom of the food chain are languishing, making about $1, $2 a day, while the people at the top of the pyramid are making billions. So this is not just happening in pockets, but across the continent, that people are now speaking in one voice and demanding that beneficiation and value addition is done right here on the continent. So these are the kinds of stories that you can find on African Stream, stories that sometimes, the mainstream media ignores or just doesn't cover because they think that the African story is not as hot as the Middle East or as juicy as the South America or as hot as North America. But we have, an all-African staff at African Stream. We've had situations whereby, working for an international organization, you want to do a story in Africa, you're told, forget it. Cover something that is happening in Europe or cover something else elsewhere.
Yeah.
But when there's something wrong, like the corruption story you were mentioning,
boom, front page, corruption rocking Africa. Now we cross over to, yeah, I know that. I know what happens there.
In fact, if I could, there are these two scenarios that I like to use. The story about South Africa. We have the South Africa Stock Exchange, which was doing amazingly at an all-time high just last week. While the stock exchange in Europe and the US were tanking, the South African Stock Exchange, the Johannesburg, was doing well. However, that story was put under the rug, and guess the story that they're running with? The story about load shedding and power cuts and blackouts, how Africans are still living in the Stone Age, what is happening. So same country, different stories.
Right. One of the things that also affects a lot of African countries, and I mean there are two things. For me, one of them is like this recently, just looking at the kind of year we've had, this week, LeBron James broke a record, 38,000 plus points. Cristiano Ronaldo changing laws in Saudi Arabia. Sportsmen doing things. Rihanna's Super Bowl, performance, in terms of the streams, was watched by more people than watched the Super Bowl. But these people are thriving because the systems are working. Do you think we'll get to a point in Africa and Kenya, where systems are working, and I know they're doing well, the Jungushes, the Terences, the cartoon comedians, but where they will be like, complain, like Kevin Hart one day complained, he said, I've done 8 movies this year, and my neighbor is a YouTuber, and we are living in the same place. And they're probably making more money than me. How can that happen for Africa so that we get to see our greats thrive, and that way our story is different?
Yeah, very good question. We have so many, they call them hubs.
Right.
These technology hubs across Africa. The highest recipients of aid, let me not call it aid, foreign direct investment.
Okay.
Because aid is something completely different.
Right.
In fact, we frown upon it.
Right.
Africa doesn't need aid, we need justice.
Right.
So back to the FDIs. We have 3 countries, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa, the highest recipients of FDI in the technology. So we have very creative, very innovative Africans that are coming up with technologies that may, compete, if not, operate in the same level as the world class, the Facebooks and the TikToks and what have you. So an African-grown company in that level. Now, that is at institutional level. At personal level, what you say is just hilarious.
Right.
Because nowadays, yes, you can be, a neighbor with someone who never leaves the home.
Exactly.
He's always there in trunks, just doing his thing. He has an office at the back where he has lights and all of these things. He's just doing content, and he's making good money out of it, actually creating a living, employing other people sometimes. So my encouragement is basically for Africans to harness this opportunity.
Support their own.
We're now on the digital, age. We started with newspapers, we went to radio, we went to television, where we are now, and we are slowly getting into the digital one. Actually, we are there now, because I believe it will not be too long before digital and traditional media start going head-to-head for eyeballs.
Right.
So support your own, watch an African content creator, like whatever they are producing, share. At African Stream, we have amazing engagement. We have people from all over the world. The other day, I was looking at our analytics. We have people from Australia, as far as Vanuatu, Nauru, the US, the Caribbean, all of these places,
right,
tuning in and watching, our content.
Right.
So it's something which is shifting, and it's doable. You just have to do it.
Yeah.
If I may, I said, if I get a platform, I'll bring this up. There's a tax regime that was introduced, by the US. So African content creators are paying 30% tax of their monthly earnings. 30%. You've just had a discussion about taxation now. Yeah. Exactly. So the only thing that Kenya needs to do is to have a Cosign agreement with the US government where that tax will be zero rated. And any content creator in Kenya will not pay any tax. It's not about...
With the US government, right?
Yes.
Not with the organization? Like
no.
YouTube and...
It's the US government because, mostly they also pay tax.
To the government.
Exactly. Right. So if you register with them, it's basically zero rated. It's not tax evasion. It's basically just something which they do to people who register. So South Africa has it already. Kenya can too.
President William Samoei Ruto, in the technical... aspects. So those who are doing media monitoring, please get this word to him that this can be done, because that then moves. I know, like, your 10,000 views in Kenya is not the same as your 10,000 views monetary-wise in the US. It's a big difference in terms of money. Maybe when I was wind up, one of the things that, there was a research that came out by the Media Council, I think yesterday, day before yesterday, and what you're talking about is true. Especially the age, you talked about the median age of 19. Between 18 to 24, we're seeing more people, getting their information and their news from the digital platforms. That happened as well during the elections. And elections in any country is full of good news and, of course, propaganda, or what would be called fake news. Do you think social media then, with the way it is, can also be used as a tool of change in that area, to change political discourse? Because I believe where there can be propaganda, there can be, I don't know the opposite of propaganda. Can be the truth. The truth, yeah, there you go. The truth. Where there is propaganda, there can be the truth. Yeah.
Well, yes, definitely. In every industry, there's a lag phase of growth, then an exponential phase. You remember that graph? I'm sure everyone has done it, in school.
Yeah.
Then, as you grow, there are teething problems which you have to encounter, and then you solve them as you go. So we've seen this problem, a challenge in the social media space. We had the Cambridge Analyticas, it's important to note that it wasn't just a Kenyan problem.
Right.
It's a global thing. They had the same issue in Russia, the United States, and Kenya as well. It's just
look at the other countries had Senate hearings, and us, we had a news story.
Yeah, we reported on it.
But anyway, go ahead. Sorry to cut you short.
Yeah, no problem. But the Senate hearing in the States, had these people pay fines.
Exactly.
Which is now from the owner of the company. And, I think they say now data is the new oil.
Okay.
Because data is so valuable to any of these organizations that selling it, would make you get a windfall.
Right.
So this is why I think such problems came up. However, I think that as these problems are being solved, the Cambridge Analyticas of the world are no longer operating as freely as they were before. I think even it's defunct now. It's no longer in operation. Right. So we are seeing the story start to change. So one of the challenges that are there on the continent with regards to that is during election time, we have countries that shut down their social media.
Right.
And interestingly enough, it happens mostly in Eastern Africa.
Big up Uganda.
Uganda. Exactly. Right. You've seen Uganda, you've seen Tanzania a while back, Ethiopia. And I think it's because governments realize the power that is in social media, that anyone can go to a polling station, do a video and say, this is what is happening here. And such things, sometimes some governments are not as open to them. And these stories are some of the stories which we also report on. As we say, given we are doing positive African positive African stories. It is not a get out of jail free card for countries that are, oppressing Africans. We stand up for Africans as well. So I think that in the political discourse, social media is a powerful tool, and we've just started to scratch the surface. Yes, propaganda has been there. I think those problems are being solved as we go, and definitely we are going to see, more positive uses for social media.
Well, I tell you what, man, this is a conversation that I've really enjoyed because of the digital aspect of it, and like you said, we're moving towards digital. But because of time, we'll have to stop there. But we do need to have this more often because I feel like it gives hope to a lot of people, because a lot of people in that median age you mentioned, 19, are out there. What they really want, they'll say, give me a smartphone. Actually, smartphone and the bundles are their issues, because they want to watch this story. So maybe you can run up and tell them where they can get this information, where they can get these rich stories, where they get to Africa Stream. Okay, so you can follow us on all the major social media platforms. We are big on TikTok, we're on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. We are just setting up LinkedIn, so it's just a matter of time before you start popping there. However, these content, we have geopolitical content, which many of our subscribers come to us for. We have festivals, not just doom and gloom in Africa, so we tell the positive stories as well. The lighter comedy stories, we also cover that. So we also do entertainment, we also do culture, we do sports. So we think of ourselves as a one-stop shop for everything African. And I think this is something which has sorely been missing. Tune into African Stream, you won't regret it. All right, well, thank you so much, Eric Kavala. Eric and I go way back. It's good to see him doing big things. 10 years ago, I was here. 10 years ago, he was right here at Roll Media. And here he is now, doing big things and telling the African story. It's an amazing thing you're doing, and I wish you all the best. Thank you so much. Super Thank you so much for having me. I tell you what, let me tell you, folks, as you're out there on digital, as you're, swiping up and going around, you need to be wary of the narrative of what you're listening to. My brother talks about the eye gate and the ear gate and the mouth gate. What you're saying, what you hear, what you see are things that affect you in one way, shape, or form. There's so much out there that is being used to shape your mind, so be careful the content that you see. Look for positive stories and always believe, as the great Kwame Nkrumah said, I am not African because I was born in Africa. I am African because Africa was born in me. We are African first, and let's stay that way. God bless you. All the worst to Arsenal tonight in their game. Mungu. For the rest of you, Mungu. Peace and love.